During the last couple months, I've played both the closed and open beta for Mortal Shell 2. And Mortal Shell 2 isn't what I expected in good and surprising ways. In this video, I'm going to talk about my experience with the betas and how things are looking for the full game. Let's get into it. I'll get to the number one surprise in the betas a bit later, but the second most surprising thing for me about Mortal Shell 2 is the removal of stamina. As I discussed in this video, Mortal Shell 1's stamina-based combat was slow and weighty, and kinda janky. But I appreciate my Souls-likes both slow and fast, and I was looking forward to a more refined, slow Souls-like with Mortal Shell 2. And I'm not getting that exactly. Mortal Shell 2 has completely removed stamina and added stance-breaking enemies through perfect parries as a central mechanic. These changes to the gameplay of Mortal Shell 2 both contribute toward the combat in Mortal Shell 2 being faster than in Mortal Shell 1. But just because it doesn't align with my expectations doesn't mean it's bad. The jank of the first game has been polished out, and the combat in the Mortal Shell 2 beta feels pretty good. Stamina is gone, but the importance of reading enemy attacks and finding the right moments to go on offense remains. Perfect parries and hardens feel good, and the executions look even better. I mean, come on. While we only got to play with 2 main weapons and 2 sidearms in the beta, they all feel good and suggest different playstyles. And that brings us to the game design. When it comes to build variety and options, Mortal Shell 2 clears its predecessor with ease. You can equip main weapons, sidearms, and seals. Seals affect your defensive verbs, with Vatra Seal giving you a Mortal Shell 1 style Harden and Perfect Harden, the Untarnished Seal giving you a Parry and Guard, the Infinity Seal giving you a stronger Perfect Parry without a Guard, and the Slayer Seal letting you rip and tear with sidearms to break stances and regain health and resolve when performing executions. This is an expansion of the seal system from Mortal Shell 1, and I like how the seals sort of turn Mortal Shell 2 into whatever flavor of Souls-like defensive verb you prefer. With stamina gone, the main weapons are all about the animations and moveset. In the beta, players can use a two-handed sword called the Iconoclast and the Hammer and Chisel, both of which felt pretty similar coming from Mortal Shell 1. The sidearms in the beta are the Nail Shot shotgun that sprays short-range bursts, and the crossbow that fires long-range bolts. These weapons are decent on their own, but they really shine when equipped with items called Tar Stones. Tar Stones come in different categories and range from functioning like blood gems that buff your weapons, to grease that infuses your weapons with status effects, to Ashes of War that let your weapon perform special moves. In addition, there are Tar Stones that you can equip to your character Harbinger that offer more universal passive benefits. The selection of Tar Stones is limited to 14 in the beta, and there's a total of 10 Tar Stone slots across weapons and Harbinger, so there wasn't a lot of room to experiment. But with a larger pool of Tar Stones, I can see there being a lot of fun to be had in how you kit yourself out. Resolve returns in Mortal Shell 2 and has become even more ubiquitous in the sequel. Resolve is accumulated by attacking with your main weapon. Abilities, infusions, and sidearms all cost resolve to use, and you can see how many uses are available at a given time by the number beside each of the icons. The breadth of uses for resolve creates nice moments of tactical decision making, where you're choosing which trick in your bag best fits the situation. While all the systems I've mentioned so far are fun and engaging to play with in the demo, it's kinda wild that I've gotten this far into discussing Mortal Shell 2 without talking about the Mortal Shells themselves. And that's because the beta doesn't really give you a variety of shells to play with. The shell Heros briefly returns during the tutorial, but for plot reasons is unavailable during your slice of open world the beta covers. During that time, you briefly run around naked as the Harbinger, who is much more capable shellless than the Foundling from Mortal Shell 1, but soon find Teal, another shell returning from Mortal Shell 1. While shells no longer seem to govern stats like health and resolve, they each have a special ability, with Heros petrifying enemies and Teal going stealth and ambushing foes. In Mortal Shell 1, getting knocked out of a shell led to a panicked run back to the shell before being demolished, But that's not the case in the sequel. When you're booted from a shell in Mortal Shell 2, you have to earn back the ability to summon the shell through fighting. Getting knocked out of a shell multiple times is possible, but it'll take more to bring the shell back each time until resting at a beacon. Shells are upgraded by spending shell points in individual shell skill trees earned by Harbinger when leveling up. We only get to glimpse into Teal's skill tree, but it's about what you'd expect. A mixture of improving his stealth and shadow strike abilities alongside passives that make him more effective. One of the passives that you can improve is Teal's resistance to poison, which can eventually be upgraded to Teal healing from stacks of poison. This felt a bit odd in the beta where you only have Teal to use and you find him in the poison zone, essentially nullifying one of the major threats of the area, but I don't think this will be a problem in the full release. I do think shells will be found in areas that play to their strengths, but you'll have other shells to choose from, and it'll be a choice for the player to make how much they want to swap between shells and invest into multiple skill trees. Which brings me to a question I've had about the full game that the beta seems to answer. How will Mortal Shell 2 handle progression in a larger game? Mortal Shell 1 is a bite-sized experience, making it about the right length to max out a couple of shells and weapons. So I wasn't sure if Mortal Shell 2 would manage a larger open world with increased shell depth, meta progression for the Harbinger, or if it would be more about experimentation and playing with multiple shells and weapons over the course of a playthrough. And I think the beta suggests pretty clearly that the answer is yes to all of the above. I was told during the closed beta that the content of the beta represents roughly 10% of the full game. During that 10% you can upgrade Teal and your equipment a decent amount. And I bet that you can fully upgrade Teal, a main weapon sidearm, and set of tar stones well before finishing the other 90% of the full game. This tells me that the design intent is likely for players to experiment with different shells, weapons, and tar stones over the course of a playthrough. Harbinger's stats will provide a sense of meta progression, with the player creating a pool of shells, weapons, and tar stones to more fully upgrade to take on new challenges. However, if there is a greater focus on the breadth of options than depth, it does make me wonder how the difficulty curve of Mortal Shell 2 might shake out and how it interacts with the world design. Mortal Shell 2 is described as an open world, and there were a number of branching paths in the beta that were blocked off and led to other sections of the beta region, as well as other regions that can be seen scattered throughout the map. The pair of literally flesh-melting fast travel devices at the top of the hub Marrow Keep implies that the game world may be broken up into two halves, with one half initially closed off. That might mean that there is an easier first set of areas that comprise the first section of the game as you develop your arsenal of shells and weapons that then give way to another set of areas that ramp up the challenge once you've upgraded your shells and weapons a fair amount. Ultimately, we still don't know enough about the world design and progression to say anything definitively, but it's something I'm even more curious about after playing through the beta. While I've been pretty positive about the Mortal Shell 2 beta experience so far, the most surprising thing about the beta for me was a double whammy of disappointment around items in Mortal Shell 2. In Mortal Shell 1, consumables have a system called Familiarity, where you don't know what an item does until you use it, and using it subsequently increases its familiarity until it's maxed, at which point the item's use would improve. For example, in Mortal Shell 1, a welt cap regenerates 30 health over 30 seconds, until its familiarity is maxed and it regenerates 30 health over 10 seconds instead. In addition, sometimes the item description will grow or change as familiarity increased. Familiarity incentivized experimenting with items to improve their usefulness and get more flavor about the world, and I was excited to see it return in Mortal Shell 2. Except it doesn't look like it is. Perhaps familiarity could be implemented in the full game, but it seems unlikely because there really aren't consumables in Mortal Shell 2 that we've seen. Items like the welt cap return, but instead of being a consumable that you use to heal situationally, they're now a collectible that heals you for a small amount when you pick one up, and grants increased health to all shells for every 100 you collect. In this particular case, I'm glad that Mortal Shell 2 has switched to an Estus-like healing system with charges that refresh at checkpoints, but the migration of consumables to collectibles that accumulate minor buffs feels underwhelming. Infusion tar stones acting as renewable weapon greases is cool, but collecting tar spores to incrementally increase poison resistance is just not that cool, and even less so when you're playing teal and want to stack poison to heal yourself. In Mortal Shell 1, you'd pop the initial tar spore blindly poisoning yourself. The second would max out familiarity, transforming the item into a consumable that heals poison and makes you immune to poison buildup for a short time. Now, I wouldn't trade out the improved gameplay to get familiarity back, so perhaps the time was better spent elsewhere, but it's a bummer to see a fun mechanic and storytelling device like familiarity disappear and then be transformed into a pretty underwhelming collectathon system. I may mourn consumables in Mortal Shell 2, but I celebrate the enemy and boss designs. Enemies and bosses in Mortal Shell 1 were fine for the most part, but they've massively improved across the board in Mortal Shell 2. The visual designs are more striking, the movesets are improved, and the executions are downright glorious. Even within the limited scope of the beta, there were a few enemies that really charmed me. I will never not punch the crap out of these tentacle-faced nerds. And the murderous babushkas and comedy of cutting down the one with the accordion got a good laugh out of me every time. The encounter design is solid, and when it's firing on all cylinders, provides some challenging and tactical situations that make you let loose with your arsenal of skills and abilities. Bosses in Mortal Shell 1 had some cool visual designs, but on the whole were a bit mediocre. Mortal Shell 2 has improved in both of these areas, with bosses like Magdalena being an absolute delight in presentation, and the Tar Golem being fun to learn and then beat without being knocked out of Harros during the fight for the Finish the Fight achievement. With the exception of the Tar Golem, the bosses in the beta are a little on the easy side, but the beta covers an early portion of the game, and part of the remit for the beta in general is getting feedback and dialing in the experience for the full game, and I have no worries about Mortal Shell 2 delivering some brutal and bombastic bosses. The level design and visuals have seen some welcome improvement over the first game. The visuals and atmosphere of the limited areas explored in the beta were striking, with trailers teasing an even greater variety in locales. The level design doesn't hit the highs of From Software's layered and interwoven dungeons, but there are a number of routes to take, nooks and crannies to explore, and pits to fall into that make the world fun to crawl over. There's also mini dungeons throughout the world in the form of beacons that can be entered and cleansed, and dungeons sprinkled throughout the world that you descend into through a silvery pool. There's a large variety in scope and quality among these dungeons, with some featuring a series of rooms to explore and a boss to face, and some being not much more than a short hallway and a couple of enemies with an item at the end. During the closed beta, I encountered a fair amount of awkward geometry and got myself stuck in a hole or two, but between the closed and open beta, I've seen many of these rough edges addressed. Between the exploration, side dungeons, and wrinkles like open world bosses and mini arena fights, the variety and pacing of Mortal Shell 2 feels dense and varied. I'm not going to talk too much about characters and stories at this point, but the quest to return your unborn Ova siblings to the Undermother is an appropriately metal follow-up to finding the glands in Mortal Shell 1, and the mystery of the Dark Passenger who's stowed away within the Undermother has my interest piqued. As mentioned earlier, the loss of familiarity has limited the world building of items that all have pretty short and limited descriptions in the beta. There's letters scattered around the world that can be read and give a little flavor, and it's funny to see how many people in the world seem to die mid-sentence writing letters. The monologues unlocked for shells when getting abilities in Mortal Shell 1 have been replaced by memories in Mortal Shell 2 that you unlock at the Shellkeeper using glimpses. This change is fine to me, and I can see there being some cool memories unlocked that help flesh out the world. That being said, I do appreciate the non-linear storytelling of the monologues in Mortal Shell 1, provided by unlocking them in whatever sequence the player wanted. That would leave you to arrange the pieces of the story together as you went, which for a lorehound like myself was a fun exercise. Mortal Shell 1 had limited but fun NPCs, and Mortal Shell 2 is expanding upon that. Rook is a delightful design and sinister advisor to the Harbinger's journey, and Franz the Tarforged Smith and my best Brev Merrick are fun designs. You can also get a milk footbath from this dude, so 10 out of 10 there. Sester Janessa returns from Mortal Shell 1, and if the trailers are any indication, her time as an NPC in the sequel might be limited, so talk to her while you can. Ultimately, Mortal Shell 2 looks like it'll tell a good story that expands upon the mythos of the series and treat us to a good cast of weirdos along the way, even if it lacks some of the storytelling devices that I thought worked well in Mortal Shell 1. If it's not clear, I'm really looking forward to getting my hands on Mortal Shell 2. I've had affection for Mortal Shell since I first played the closed beta back in 2020, and found myself really blown away with what they're doing for Mortal Shell 2, and it's been a delight to see the game actively grow and improve between the closed and open betas. From dialing in the title sequence to fixing world geometry, to cleaning up a bunch of rough edges and greatly improving performance, it's impressive to see what they've been able to cover over the last couple months. The folks at Cold Symmetry are clearly putting everything into Mortal Shell 2. Mortal Shell 1 presented some cool ideas in a bite-sized package, but they're really upping their game for the sequel. Mortal Shell 2 is not what I expected, but much more, and I can't wait to see how it all comes together. Supposedly, Mortal Shell 2 comes out later this year in 2026. Editing Sean here. Since recording that originally, it is confirmed that Mortal Shell 2 will be releasing on August 20th, 2026. Now let's get back to it. Have you played the Mortal Shell 2 beta? What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and be sure to subscribe to the Lore Hunter for more Mortal Shell content. As always, thanks for your support, thank the Undermether for this execution, and thanks for watching.